In May 2019, engineers in Shenzhen watched something most people never think about: a software certificate expire. Not a dramatic shutdown, not a press conference. A permission quietly revoked. The device in their hands was a Huawei smartphone days from shipping to tens of millions of people, and the license that let Google's apps run on it had just been canceled by the United States Commerce Department. Maps, gone. The App Store, gone. The payment layer, the account system, the search bar people tap before they do anything else. Gone. On paper, that phone was finished. What happened next is the story the sanctions were not designed to tell. The word that threads through it is stack. Every layer of software and silicon a device needs to function, from the kernel at the bottom to the camera app at the top. Remember that word. It changes meaning by the time we reach the end. Huawei had been one of the world's highest volume smartphone makers. The entity list did not kill that business. It did reshape it permanently into something its architects did not intend to build. 3 reveals: Huawei survived, then how it survived, then why the people who designed the restriction should have seen the 3rd reveal coming before they signed the order. The surface story is that Huawei absorbed a blow that most analysts thought would be fatal and stayed in the market. The company's international shipments did collapse. Analyst estimates from firms tracking the industry confirmed steep declines in its consumer division in the years following the listing, and Huawei's own annual filings acknowledged it. I want to be honest here. Surviving a Google cutoff in terms of revenue is not the same as thriving. Huawei's smartphone share outside China fell sharply. I am not going to pretend the sanction failed on every dimension. What I am arguing is that it succeeded at the wrong thing. It created the pressure that built something the sanctions were meant to prevent. The phone is still shipping. HarmonyOS is what it runs. Google's Android arrangement has 2 distinct parts. The kernel is open source. Anyone can use it. But the proprietary layer on top, the App Store, the maps, the account infrastructure, the certificate that tells the device it belongs to the global ecosystem, that is licensed, and that license was what the Commerce Department revoked. Huawei had access to the foundation. It had lost the load-bearing middle. A modern smartphone's software dependencies have roughly as many discrete layers as a skyscraper has structural floors. Google provided, in the standard arrangement, something like the bottom third of the occupied building. Huawei had to pour new concrete from that point down while the building was still full of residents. HarmonyOS was announced within months of the listing. Early versions drew heavily on the Android open-source codebase, which was fair game. Newer versions, which Huawei calls HarmonyOS Next, are reported to represent a genuine architectural departure, a microkernel design with no compatibility layer for Android applications. Huawei's claims here deserve scrutiny. No independent body has audited the codebase at the level that would confirm every assertion the company has made, and rebuilding an operating system mid-flight is the engineering equivalent of swapping a plane's navigation system while it carries passengers. The plane cannot land while you work. You cannot work while it is grounded. And yet, the plane did not crash. My read on HarmonyOS is that it is not yet a peer to Android in the depth of its developer ecosystem. Huawei's figures on app counts and developer adoption are company-reported numbers, and independent verification at scale has not happened. But ecosystem depth is a lagging indicator. The kernel is already domestic. The core programming interfaces are already domestic. The gap that remains is the one that closes last, and it is closing. Underneath the operating system sits the chip. This is where the story gets harder to resolve with confidence. Huawei had been designing its own application processors, the Kirin series, through its semiconductor subsidiary, HiSilicon, for years before 2019. The sanctions did not create HiSilicon. They forced it to become the only option. But chip design without chip fabrication is an incomplete loop. The Kirin had been manufactured at TSMC. United States restrictions effectively ended that relationship. Reports from Reuters and multiple industry analysts suggest that China's largest domestic foundry, SMIC, has since produced Kirin chips at process nodes more advanced than its publicly stated capability. No Western body has independently confirmed the exact specifications and yield rates, the percentage of chips per wafer that actually function, which determines whether a process is commercially viable, are not public. These are contested claims, and I am treating them as such. What is not contested is the direction. Each layer Huawei rebuilt made the layer above it more viable. The chip made the operating system credible. The operating system made the App Store meaningful. The App Store made the device shippable. That compounding is not accidental, and it is not the dynamic the sanctions architects appear to have modeled. Before 2019, Huawei was an exceptional systems integrator. It assembled world-class products from a global supply chain, the same model that drives most of the technology industry. After 2019, it was forced towards something structurally different. A company that designs its own chips, writes its own operating system, runs its own distribution platform, and is building toward domestic fabrication partnerships. There is no major Western consumer technology company that controls a comparable domestic stack. Apple designs its own chips, but manufactures them at TSMC and depends on a global logistics infrastructure. Google writes its own operating system but has its processors made externally. The company that most resembles what Huawei is becoming, integrated from silicon to software to distribution, is the kind of company the sanctions were meant to protect the global ecosystem against. Western export controls work like a dam built to stop a river from reaching the valley below. What the model did not account for was that a river, blocked long enough, learns to cut a new channel, one that does not run through the dam at all. That is the thesis at full strength, and now I want to give it the pushback it deserves, because some of what I just said might be overstated. 3 points. First, the fabrication gap. SMIC and Huawei's leading-edge chip claims have not been independently benchmarked. If the chips being produced are underperforming their marketed specifications, the competitive threat is materially smaller than the headline numbers suggest. Second, ecosystem depth is not kernel depth. HarmonyOS may control its own foundation, but an operating system lives or dies by the applications developers build for it. Outside China, developer adoption reports suggest the numbers remain thin. A stack that only functions inside one market is a domestic alternative, not a global rival. Third, there is a hard physical constraint. The most advanced chip fabrication requires extreme ultraviolet lithography equipment that ASML, a Dutch company, produces and that remains under export control. China has not demonstrated a domestic equivalent. There is a ceiling on what can be achieved with the tools currently available inside the country, and that ceiling has not been lifted. All three of these are real. I am not dismissing them. My argument is not that Huawei has already won. It is that the sanctions created the structural conditions for an attempt that would not otherwise have existed, and that attempt is farther along than the people who designed the sanctions appear to have planned for. Here's what I think the record actually shows. Western export controls are calibrated to deny access, not to deny capability. Those are the same thing only if the target cannot build the capability themselves. Huawei proved that assumption was wrong before the first entity list entry had finished printing. Google did not intend to hand Huawei a roadmap. The listing was meant to be a ceiling. What it turned out to be was a checklist. Every item Huawei could not buy became an item it had to learn to build. The stack is not complete, but it is more complete than it was in 2019, and the direction has not reversed. The Mate series device, the one running HarmonyOS on a Kirin chip, is not simply a consumer product now. It is a document. It demonstrates that the full stack, from the instructions etched into silicon to the interface a person taps to send a message, can be assembled from inside the border. Not perfectly, not yet at the frontier on every layer, but assembled. That word, stack, lands differently now than it did at the start. It no longer means only what a phone needs to function. It means what a country needs to stop asking permission. The most consequential product Huawei has shipped in the last 5 years is not a phone. It is the proof that the phone is possible. If you were in the room when the entity list decision was made in 2019, and you could see what Huawei looks like today, would you make the same call? And if not, what would you do instead? Put your answer below, I will read them. If you want to keep following how these restrictions are reshaping the industry in ways no one announced, subscribe. The next one goes deeper into the fabrication layer.